Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm so pleased to welcome Andrew Cartmel back onto the show, this time to talk about Like a Bullet, the latest Paperback Sleuth novel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if I've heard anybody else say the title out loud before. It sounded really good. Maybe it's just you said it.
It's very good. It is oh no, I should have remembered the poet's name.
Oh, it's okay. I remembered because I have to. It's Melville.
Thank you.
It's a poem called Shiloh, a Requiem, I think. So it's great because it sounds like a totally cool kind of action title, like a bullet. And then it turns out to be this, I guess it would be 19th century poem by by Melville. So it's kind of a cool little double whammy that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I loved reading because you include a little bit more of the poem in the book itself.
That's right. Yeah.
And I loved seeing the context of it. It made me, honestly, it made me want to go and read the poem.
It's really interesting because, I mean, we, like everybody else, I only know Melville through Moby Dick. This, fortunately, is considerably shorter, this poem. It takes less of your time. But it's quite an interesting poem, and I thought it was quite nice to be able to give an analysis of it from one of the characters, sort of to give a bit more of an explanation of why it seemed relevant.
Absolutely.
And there are a couple of delightful little literary conversations like that in this book, since this is a book about books. But I don't want to get too far into our conversation because first, what is something great that happened recently?
Ooh. Okay, so my friend Ben Aronovich, whom you may know, it looks like he's going to help me put on another play. So that was great. So hearing from him and suddenly out of the blue, it looking like that we'll be doing a play this year. That was great.
That's very exciting. Can you tell us more about the play?
I won't, only because I don't want to jinx it. We haven't, it's not a done deal yet. I don't want to end up with egg on my face, but I'll be very happily let you know as soon as it's sorted out. But I'm hoping to do a comedy in October or November at a theater we haven't used before. So we'll see if we can pull that together.
Very
Fingers
excited.
crossed.
Yeah. Sarah, how about you?
My good thing is that I have tomatoes on my tomato plants.
Oh,
Ooh.
lucky.
I'm very pleased.
I still only have flowers, but it is colder where I am.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't sure that I would get a lot of tomatoes this year. I'm still not sure if I'll get a lot of tomatoes this year because it has been cooler this summer. But I'm at least going to have 3 or 4.
That's lovely.
You know, technically summer only just started.
Well, true. True. But it's still been cooler.
Yeah. My good thing is that our 3rd issue of our literary magazine came out a little while ago. A little longer by the time this episode is out, but I learned how to make EPUB file types instead of just PDFs, which has been a challenge, and I've overcome it, and now I don't have to, well, not that I don't have to worry about it anymore, but it's not hanging over me all the time.
Yeah, I know what that's like, so congrats.
Thank you. What is everyone drinking today?
Well, I've been drinking hot chocolate all day, but just this evening I made myself, for the first time in months, a cup of green tea. And there's a reason for that, but I think you can ask me about books I'm reading, and the reason for that is from a book I was reading, so I'll save it for the moment.
Oh, perfect.
I thought about making myself tea. I thought about making myself hot chocolate because hot chocolate is
so good. Never hesitate.
It's excellent, but it also features quite a bit in this book.
So true.
But ultimately, I decided that I would have a glass of red wine in honor of Monty, who is the author of the books that Cordelia is looking for in Like a Bullet.
And I am drinking iced tea because it's warm out. It is a black tea rose blend.
Sounds good.
From the Huntington Library, which is neither in Huntington nor a library.
And they make iced tea there. That's kind of interesting.
Well, the tea leaves are from there. They have like a tea house. It's more, I've only ever been to the gardens.
Oh, that's how civilized.
Yes, it's really lovely. It's in LA. And so I made myself iced tea from it, and it's very good. Just a tiny bit of sugar, because I'm
do you get down to LA much?
I grew up in Southern California.
Oh, fantastic.
So I have family down there still.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm. And has anyone read anything good lately?
So the books as usual, I've got a bunch of books on the go, but the one that's relevant to the beverage is I'm reading a book by Michael Pollan called "This Is Your Mind on Plants," and in it it's about psychoactive plants, and he covers opium, caffeine, and what's the third one? And something else later in the book. Oh yes, psychedelics. I think it might be peyote or mescaline or something, but I haven't got to that bit yet. And it was such a beguiling account of caffeine and how its impact, which is incredible on our civilization, like the whole idea that the Reformation, the Enlightenment were brought about by caffeine drinking. It's fascinating. And also he was talking about how in the Far East it was completely a spiritual beverage. It was developed to aid meditation, and it was, first grown by Buddhist monks. And so I thought, wow, I've got some green tea in the kitchen. I was compelled to go and make some. So I'm reading that, but I'm also reading a book called Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is a supernatural thriller about the movie business in Mexico in the 60s. And I don't know if you know anything about silver nitrate. It's an old technology for making movies. But I saw a silver nitrate print at the British Film Institute last year, and it's remarkable. Like it looks like nothing else, but it's really dangerous because it's highly flammable and can spontaneously combust. So all these vast libraries of silver nitrate prints have gone up in flames. But so it's a really fascinating technology, and it has a certain sort of poetic resonance, which Silvia Moreno Garcia is certainly digging into. She wrote a famous book called Mexican Gothic. Anyway, so those two are very much on the go, but you can't shut me up, I'm afraid. I got to keep going. Got to tell you about my other discoveries. I reread a book called Falling Angel by William Hurtzberg, which again is a supernatural crime story. It's a detective novel. It's made into a movie called Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke and Robert De Niro. And it was such a great book. I had forgotten how great it was, or I'd never realized how great it was. So I looked at all these other books by the author. And one of Hurtzberg's books was this enormous biography of a famous hippie writer called Richard Brautigan, who I knew all about, but I never knew any of the details of him. So I started reading the biography, and that's fascinating too. It goes into all the kind of the poets, the beat poets in the San Francisco in the late 50s, that whole scene from which Richard Brautigan arose. So I know I'm talking about too many books, but I couldn't resist mentioning that one because it made such an impression on me.
No such thing as too many books.
Okay, then one more. I've
Okay.
rediscovered Patricia Highsmith, and the London Times declared her the finest crime novelist of them all. I thought, oh, that's a bit. But now I've read a few that I hadn't encountered before. I think they may be right. She may be the greatest crime novelist of all time. So, but I promise that's me done for books for a little while.
Well, it's great because I don't have an answer, and I feel like we've covered enough books.
You can have two of my books.
Yeah.
You can have two of mine.
And I will also borrow one. Thank you.
Oh, great. You should literally, any of those books are worthy of your time, particularly the Patricia Highsmiths. Two books in particular, Deep Water and The Glass Cell. They were just completely knocked me out. They're such brilliant, brutal crime novels.
Wonderful. But actually, that's a lie. I did read one book. It was Like a Bullet by Andrew Cartmel.
Oh, again, what a great title.
It really is. And this book, so we are back with Cordelia Stanmer. She's been hired to find some very rare paperback novels. And in this book, particularly, she's looking for a series of commando novels. And what drew you to that for the topic that Cordelia is sleuthing for this book?
Ooh, you're asking me to excavate a bit. I can't remember exactly why I decided to write about war. Obviously, I go through different genres, and so this time it was going to be war novels. I suppose I was aware of that there is this sort of school of pulp war stories, that especially in paperback, which were popular late 50s, early 60s, far enough from the Second World War for people to be able to turn it into popular entertainment, but near enough for it to be very alive in the memory of the population. But also, to be fair, I believe I had the basic MacGuffin, the basic storyline. That's right. I'd come up with a basic storyline, which I don't want to give too much away, but there is sort of treasure at stake, and people are willing to kill for it. And I had a war story which enabled me to make that part of the plot. And because it was a war story, that's why that was the genre of books we're exploring. I can give more details about that in the spoiler section.
We will save that for the spoiler section. We have read what I would consider a war novel, The Eagle Has Landed by Jack Higgins. I feel like that counts.
Oh, I like that book a lot. It's sort of been somewhat weakened in my memory by an inferior film adaptation, but the book was really strikingly good.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since we read it. And we read it for the podcast and ended up never releasing an episode on it. But I remember it being quite compelling. Do you think that that experience with those novels brings anything different to reading Like a Bullet? I mean, obviously you don't have to have read tons of
Ooh,
war
but I think it
novels,
does
but
because Jack Higgins, who wrote under a variety of pseudonyms, including James Graham, I had a bunch of his books as James Graham. The Wrath of God was one. That's exactly, he was churning out these kind of war and crime and espionage novels, some of which were very good. But he was a kind of prolific, I don't want to use the word hack writer because he was too good for that, but he was writing pot boilers. He was definitely writing for money. And I read a bunch of his books back to back, and I remember being deeply distressed because the same phrases would turn up, like the stars in the sky at night would be like a handful of diamonds strewn across black velvet. And then there's another thing. And in fact, Cordelia mentions this, I think, in one of the books, where a little trapped wind blows in and circles around the corner of the room and dies. And it's a great description when you read it once, but when you read it twice, and this is the problem with people who are writing lots of books, particularly back in the days before we had word processors, because what I do is I keep a file of all my books. It's a huge file. It's getting a bit too big to search. But if I think, did I use that phrase before? I can actually look and see. But these guys could never have done that. And another example would be John Dixon Carr, great crime novelist. And there's a sequence in his books where somebody's walking up to the front of a house. It says, in the garden, the birds were bickering. I thought, that's the greatest description of bird song ever. The birds were bickering. Then I read it in another one of his books, then in another one. Just such a shame because it is a brilliant description, but it's cheapened by repetition. Anyway, all which is to say Jack Higgins is in that sort of area, very gifted writer, but writing commercially for money, for a quick buck. But he still brought out some beautiful books. And that is exactly the kind of genre writing that we're talking about in this case that Cordelia is looking at. Just as a sideline, I wanted to say, though, that Jack Higgins' daughter wrote some very effective historical novels, and she did really well. I'm wondering if her name was Patricia Finney or something like that. It wasn't the same as her dad. But anyway, worth exploring and good to know because I remember him saying something like, oh, she's a much better writer than I ever was. And she had quite a lot of success, which is great.
Do you have any recommendations for a reader who, after reading Like a Bullet, might want to try out a war novel?
Oh, a good one. What would a good one be? Let me have a quick think about that. Oh, there's a book by Len Deighton called Bomber, which is just stunningly good. It's really great. It's about one night, a bombing mission over Germany, and it's about all the characters involved, both in the British bomber, but also on the ground, like the people who are going to get hit by the bombs. And it's this, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It's this enormous kind of sweeping expanse, and it's really examined with huge, brilliant critical detail. So that's an amazing war novel. So now that my brain's kicked in, thank you, T, I'm beginning to come up with various suggestions, but I don't think I can come up with a better one than that. So Bomber by Len Deighton. And it's also got this beautiful thing that the bombing mission takes place and this is very appropriate to us now, takes place on the night of the 31st of June. And at the beginning of the book, he says, there never was a bomber called whatever it was. There never was these characters. And he also said, there never was a 31st of June in that year or any other. Oh, that's right. That's just so clever. Just part of the brilliance of Len Deighton. People may know him better if they know him at all now as an espionage novelist. But he knew a lot about World War II, and Bomber is a remarkable novel and a big one. But it's one of those big books that you kind of love getting lost in.
Awesome. Now I'm tempted to go check it out.
It's an extraordinary book, really powerful.
So in Like a Bullet, bringing it back to your book for a minute, there's a lot of conversations around research for writing books because Monty, who has written these commando novels, is essentially getting his stories from someone who was there and did that kind of work. And you have a line about including details that only a chap who'd been there and done it would know. So, what was your research process like for this book, and how did you know those details to include?
Oh, right. Yeah, I did do a quick bit of research about the weapons. And there's this something fascinating about, I think it was about how the Sten gun jammed. If you put in the full complement of bullets, it would tend to jam. Oh, well, that's great. But, I feel a bit ashamed. I just researched that online. But it was such a beautiful little detail. And I thought it really was a telling detail. And it's the sort of, you don't need much of that. I think he says in the book, you don't need much of that just to bring it to life. So that was just a bit of the online research. I'm not sure anything came from life. My dad did fight in the Second World War. He wasn't a commando. He was in the Canadian Artillery. So I picked up a lot of stuff from him, but I'm not sure I've deployed any of it in this particular book.
The internet does make research easier.
It's true.
I think Monty also makes a reference to the fact that when he was writing, you had to actually go to a library to research.
Yes, and I remember my buddy Ben Aronovich, who I mentioned earlier, has always done research. Like, he's always been really good at that. And he always used to berate me or tease me for being lazy about doing research. But all that changed as soon as the internet arrived, because I didn't have any ideological objection to research. I just had an ideological objection to leaving the house.
Very valid.
So this is, of course, one of the Paperback Sleuth novels that focuses on Cordelia, as opposed to a Vinyl Detective novel that follows the Vinyl Detective. And there is a lot more action-adventure in this series of books. Is that just due to Cordelia's go-get-'em approach to problem solving?
I wasn't, I'm sure you're right. I wasn't particularly aware of that. That's interesting. Because one would have thought, because she's a female protagonist and because it's the world of books, which is quite a cozy world, there wouldn't be so much. But yeah, she does have a tendency to get into scrapes. Also, she's quite kick-ass. And also, she has a very useful friend in the shape of her landlord.
Yes. And maybe it's just my perception, but it feels like Cordelia is going and finding trouble, whereas the Vinyl Detective is doing normal things and trouble is thrust upon him.
Yeah, he does his best to stay out of trouble. That's true.
Yeah, that was actually the point that I was going to make, was that the Vinyl Detective, yes, there is some action, particularly like in the first couple of books, I think, but he is trying to avoid it as much as he can. And Cordelia is going out and being active about getting herself involved in these kinds of hijinks.
And I also think that there's still something about, because it's a female viewpoint character, we're more invested in her and more concerned about her when jeopardy beckons. I think that there's some truth in that.
We have this question officially in the spoiler section, so you might not be able to answer it. And I guess it's actually not a question at all. But we noticed and really appreciated that Cordelia always has a sort of safety backup plan whenever she does embark on one of her adventures. And that just felt very realistic. I mean, the maybe low-key real-world version is texting your friends when you get home.
Yeah.
But she has the sort of much more involved version of that whenever she's going on one of her heists.
When I'm reading a book, I always like the character. If I'm supposed to sympathize with the character, I want them to be smart. I don't want them to make dumb mistakes. So when I'm writing my own books, I'm very aware of that. So I try and make my characters as smart as possible. And in a case like that, when they're doing something dangerous, to be as careful as possible. So I guess that's probably where that comes from.
Well, definitely. I mean, I appreciated it. Just, I like that she's sensible about these terrible things that she's doing.
She's very methodical. That's true.
Yes.
We get an introduction to a couple of different characters, and maybe a reintroduction to some of them as well. And one thing that I noticed coming up in this book was sort of the difference between old and new money. Eric Makeloud, the rock star, Ozzy and Finn, I'm going to call them computer nerds. Then, of course, Melantha and Betty as two other characters who had much more different tastes, perhaps. And maybe I was mostly picking up on the description of their homes and how they seemed, although all of them are rich, it's displayed very differently. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Melantha, particularly, I'm so pleased with that name. I believe it means dark flower. But she's this very kind of sinister, ruthless British aristocrat. And I could really see that character. And as you say, old money and lots of it. But Betty, of course, we met in the previous book.
Yes. And Eric MacLeod we've met in other books as well, although Cordelia has not.
No, it's fun. And it was one of the fun things about this book is I began to have this book come together in my head as I was finishing the previous paperback, finishing writing it. And I realized I could hook them together quite easily because I knew this was going to be about looking for pulp war paperbacks. And in the previous Paperback Sleuth, Ashram Assassin, she actually finds a stash of these. And these really exist. These are this book by a guy called Sven Hassel, which is about this German battalion. Anyway, it's completely nuts, but these books sold in their millions, and they do exist, and they're absolutely pulpy war stories. So she finds a whole treasure trove of these and sells them to somebody at a huge profit. She flips them. And I suddenly thought, wait a minute, that could be Eric MacLeod. So I set it all up. So I actually went back and I don't think I actually said it was Eric, but I made it uniform, made it all hook up nicely so that it could lead into this. So it actually became a little kind of prelude to this novel. So I really like doing that.
Fantastic. Are we ready to move on to the spoiler section? Sarah, did I cover everything?
I think we have.
right.
Yeah, I want to talk about spoiler stuff.
I love it because it means we don't have to worry about what we say. Right?
Exactly.
Well, before we move on to the spoiler conversation, I have our segue question for Sarah. Who should read this book?
You should read this book. Well, if you read the first two and enjoyed them, you're going to like this one. But if you haven't read the first two, if you want a book featuring delightfully awful people going on some sometimes murderous adventures and fun heists, but crucially, that doesn't stress you out for the main character. Like, yes, that she's in danger, but I'm not worried at the end of the novel that she's going to be dead. And I really enjoy that. Like, it means that I can enjoy the danger that she's in without stressing.
I think obviously, if you've got a recurring character, you sort of always know that, don't you? But that is the particular, I think, appeal of the cozy crime novels, that they can get very dark and scary with a safe place at the center of them.
Yeah, exactly. This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Fiction Fans.
That's us. We really appreciate our patrons because otherwise we fund this podcast entirely ourselves.
Patrons can find weekly bonus content, monthly exclusive episodes, and they have free access to our biannual zine, Solsticia.
You can find all of that and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers.
Well, as Sarah mentioned just a second ago, I really felt your joy in writing less likable characters in this book. I think it's something you've mentioned before about this series. But I think every single character in this had something about them that made me go, you would be so cool. Except.
Oh dear.
But that's great because somehow I still enjoyed reading about all of them.
Yeah.
Well, somebody called them my gallery of grotesques. I think these people are pretty normal, but it's true that's how they do strike the reader. But that's also what makes them vivid and I think engaging for the reader.
I think they're normal, but just like a notch above because, I mean, most people don't go on heists to steal rare paperbacks, even though I'm not going to say I haven't been tempted because I am a book collector. I do, sometimes there are those books that I just, man, if I had no morals like Cordelia, I would, I get it.
No morals and a very good heist plan.
Yes. And good backup, which is also quite crucial.
Yeah, crucial.
Which does bring me to the one character with zero flaws, which is Edwin. And of course, Rainbottle, his dog. Although that might just be me projecting a little bit.
I think Rainbottle is absolutely the character with zero flaws. I might argue a little bit that Edwin's a great guy. I love him.
But he does tend to kill people.
He does
see that as a character
people.
flaw.
I thought it was interesting, though, when he embarks on his personal heist in this book that we don't quite see on the page. He does not actually end up following through with his plan to kill the bodyguards who have been trying to kill Cordelia at that point for like at least a third of the book.
Yeah, I like the fact that that turned out. There probably was a stage at which I thought he would kill him, and then I thought it's so much more interesting if he doesn't, so much
Mhm.
more human. And also, it was very useful from an exposition point of view because instead of just killing the guy not only could he tell us lots of interesting things, but also suddenly he could become an ally, an associate, an accomplice. He could help us out. So that was a much more interesting way for it to go. And also, it made Edwin sort of more complex and nuanced. Instead of just killing somebody, you could see he could hold back when he saw that there was a better way.
I thought that it was really interesting the way that Osborne became kind of their man on the inside. And that transition from antagonist to ally was just fascinating. And it does bring, like you say, it does bring nuance to Edwin. And it also tempers his serial killerness just a little bit. Like he's
Yeah.
not he doesn't kill people who haven't in some way, deserved it.
Well, yeah, I mean, also Osborne, he was one of two people who tried to kill Cordelia, but obviously he didn't really want to do that, and he felt terrible about having been part of that. So that's sort of that was what saved him, I think.
Poor guy. I felt bad for him.
Me too. He was almost my caveat for the one character with no flaws, but you get one attempted murder, not two. That's where I draw the line.
Something that struck me in this book is we see Tinkler, who we know from the Vinyl Detective novels and who we've seen in previous Paperback Sleuth books, but it struck me that he's almost kind of cool in this book at points. Like I definitely think he's cooler in Cordelia's novels than he is in the Vinyl Detectives novels.
Which is so odd because she has dated him and really kind of looks down on him. And yet, but one reason he might seem cooler in this one is because there's people who are even nerdier than him, which are the two brothers in Cambridge. So by comparison to them, he is kind of cool.
Well, and also like he's supportive. Yes, he just wants to sleep with her, but he's supportive. He doesn't bat an eye when she says she's going to steal books, and he brings her tech so that he can do it more so that she can do it more successfully.
That's true. Yeah, he brings her the bag of tricks from Nevada.
Yeah. So I just, I was very supportive of him in this book. I was like, actually, Tinkler, you're great right
Well,
now.
that's nice. He'd be so pleased to hear that.
Cordelia tends to get herself in over her head. And in this book, we see that by her attempt to steal a couple of paperbacks ends up with her in possession of 13 bars of Nazi gold. An escalation that no one saw coming.
That when I realized that Nazi gold could be at the heart of this novel, I was so pleased, and that's the novel sort of grew outwards from that.
Was that sort of your original concept for
Well,
the story?
okay, so in full disclosure, I read a book by Marjorie Allingham, which is a classic crime novel called Tiger in the Smoke, and that was about these soldiers who came back from the war after a mysterious mission with something. And I thought, oh, it's going to be Nazi gold, but it wasn't. It was something really boring. It was just so boring. And I thought, oh, but that's fine because that frees me up to do what I thought it was going to be, which is they've got this cash from Nazi gold. So I was inspired by that book, which is a huge classic and highly regarded. But personally, it disappointed me on that front, which is great, as I say, because it enabled me to come up with a plot for this.
Nazi gold definitely is more fun than anything else I can think of. So
Well, in that book, it was like it's like a statue of an angel, like a really boring. Anyway, it's really boring. It was super boring.
You mentioned that originally Edwin was going to murder the bodyguards. How much of the book changed because of that?
Well, everything is sort of in a kind of state of flux before you get there, and so I would have considered that possibility and perhaps discarded it quite early on because Osborne was so useful for the ending, which is a kind of well organized heist, isn't it? And also, you want to keep the level of mayhem and jeopardy high, but at the same time, you sort of want to keep body count low in terms of plausibility.
Yeah, someone's going to notice if too many people show up dead, right?
Well, certainly body count by somebody like Edwin, because you can't have him just slaughtering people at your convenience. If the bad guys are killing lots of people, that's a different matter because it just makes them more dangerous and scary.
And also, we want the bad guys to be caught at the end. We don't want Edwin to be caught.
Yeah,
True.
that's right.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about this, but Cordelia kind of assembles a team at the end, and we do get these very fun like group heist scenes. How did your planning of the heist for a group differ from planning the heist for Cordelia alone, or does it?
Well, this was definitely like a classic heist, like an Ocean's 11 type thing, because you have a bunch of people
Yeah.
coming in. I was very pleased with how it turned out because it moved really quickly, and it was like you just hit the beats. Like they'd obviously worked out the things they needed to do, and they just did them, and it was kind of really smooth and smart, and it ended up with the bad guys neatly tied up with a bow and left for the cops. Because I had a lot of trouble initially working out because I had a dead body to deal with. I thought, how the hell are we going to get the dead body? And I realized the dead body could be useful if you planted it with. But how do you get the bad guys to the dead body? I went through all these scenarios and suddenly thought, oh, it could all happen at Melantha's house. When I realized I could just bring it all together there, everything could happen. And so I was very pleased with that. And it took quite a while to work that out because the body was in Cambridge, right? And I thought, oh, we have to go to Cambridge, and what are we going to do? But then I realized that they could just bring the body to London. That I was very pleased with that, just from a craft point of view, like purely carpentry, so to speak. It just logistically, I worked out what needed doing. And so it ended up being this very neat, clean ending where all these things happen. And they nail the bad guys so good. I was very happy about that. That was one of the two things that I really was proud of in this book. One of the two sequences. I wonder if you can guess what the other one was.
Is it the pepper spray in the car?
Oh, thank you, Sam. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was wrong of me to go fishing for that, but I really wanted to know if that had made an impression.
No, it was so perfectly set up when Edwin gifts pepper spray to Cordelia and says, whatever you do not use it in a car. But of course, she's at the time being suffocated by a plastic bag, which keeps her safe from the pepper spray.
When I realized that, I was just so pleased. I was just so pleased because I thought, she's in the car, she can't use it. But what if and it was great because like the two things cancel each other out. It was so wonderful. Their attempt to kill her actually protects her. And I was walking around on air for days after I thought that. So those are the two sequences I was supremely proud of, is the pepper spray in the car and the final heist setup. I just thought those worked really well. I know this is very modest, but I'll be honest with you guys, I was very, very happy with those. And I sort of felt that those two sequences made the book, at least for me.
They definitely work really well. This is such a fun book. I enjoy all of your books, the Final Detective books, the Paperback Sleuth books, but I do have a fondness for Cordelia because I am a book collector myself. And so I can definitely, like, I understand the terms in a way I don't necessarily with the Final Detective books. And,
yeah, absolutely fair enough.
So it's really fun. Incidentally, about the pepper spray, I had no idea that it was illegal in the UK.
I didn't. Again, I did research, and I thought, whoa, it's illegal. Wow, yeah. And then I was looking up, and I was looking at all these caveat, all the warnings like do not use in a car, and I thought,
Knives also, which we see a little bit of when the at the time unknown entity is threatening Cordelia, or perhaps Tinkler. They use a knife
the old knife for the photo trick. Yeah.
Yes.
It was a commando dagger. My dad actually had one of those, even though he wasn't a commando. I remember seeing it when I was a kid. It's very distinctive and it's kind of iconic. It represents the commandos, that commando dagger.
And it leaves no question in our hero's mind that this is, in fact, about these books. Right?
Yeah,
it links
exactly.
the threat exactly to her current job. A little while ago, you mentioned the body. And I felt so bad for Finn. I didn't think it was possible, but he must have been dead for a week? How much time passes in this book and no one notices?
I don't know, but it's several days, yeah.
Yeah. No one notices. So
know,
only thing that could make me feel bad for him.
It's yeah, but it's just because he's a terrible, shallow person doesn't mean that should have happened to him. And his brother, all along I had this notion that his brother would go into hiding, that when he emerged from hiding, it would actually turn into a love story. And I just couldn't find anywhere to fit that in the book. And my editor said, well, what happened to the brother? You need to tie up that loose end. So I thought, okay, I'll put the love story in at the very end because I thought he should have a happy ending. And I was able to do it in just a few sentences. And then the editor was really pleased because he thought I just plucked this out of the air. But this had been my plan all along, but there just didn't seem to be room to include that because it just seemed the book was over at that point. So I was really happy to get that in there. So at least he could have a happy ending.
He deserves some happiness.
Well, he was always very nice and polite too, wasn't he? He was trying to be a good guy.
He was doing his best, and he had to live with his terrible brother, who didn't necessarily deserve to be dead and left for dead for 3 days or however many days. But he was
it's interesting
still
that it's
bad.
not just the fact that he's dead; it's the fact that he's lying unnoticed.
Yeah,
Which is particularly poignant. That gets to all of us. That's really interesting.
Although, to be fair, it's only because Ozzy is in hiding that he doesn't say anything, right? He has been noticed, just the person who noticed is lying
And I can't
low.
afford to step forward. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was so well done, very, very subtly done during Ozzy's introduction. He comes up and hugs Cordelia, like completely shatters all personal space boundaries. And of course, her hackles are raised. I, as the reader, my hackles are raised. I'm like, ugh. But then he immediately also does that to who was with her at the time? Tinkler. I think.
yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, he's just like this. He's not specifically creeping on Cordelia. And it
No,
completely
he just doesn't really.
tone.
He's trying to navigate human relationships. He doesn't really have the hang of it.
Yeah.
Well, and especially because you can contrast that to Finn, who is clearly creeping on Cordelia.
Yeah, he thinks he's a ladies' man.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not anybody's man.
No.
But don't speak ill of the dead, poor guy. Yeah.
I mean, again, he didn't necessarily deserve to be left as a dead body for multiple days, but I wasn't sad that he was a dead body.
And he proves very useful at the end for entrapping the bad guys.
Also very true.
Well, I think that covers our questions. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you wanted to talk about? Any other plastic bags over the head that we missed?
I did those two sequences I was so proud of. I couldn't resist sort of fishing to see, but it turned out that had proved memorable for you. So I was enormously delighted to hear that. I like the way that Monty turned out as a character. He's kind of lovably, he's just himself. He's terrible, but he is himself. So that was a lot of fun. And again, he was sort of a hippie 60s character. And I'm fascinated by that period. So that was fun to explore. And there were a lot of people who were writing those pulp novels at the time. They were just like writing books super fast for low, well, relatively low pay, but making quite a lot of money out of doing it. So that was a real thing, that sort of wave of paperback pulp fiction. But maybe we'll get to explore that more in some future novels of the Paperback Sleuth.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have any plans to bring Monty back? Obviously not necessarily as a main character, but just as a kind of cameo or secondary.
I haven't thought about that at all, but he could easily recur because once these characters become part of the repertory company, they do tend to, whenever I think, oh, I need a certain character for a certain purpose in a book, I've got this wonderful broad range of characters to draw on, so he could easily turn up again. It might be fun for him to turn up in a final detective book.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are amassing quite a cast of characters at this point.
It's so much fun. It's really great. It's fun creating characters, but even more fun to have a character you've already created and bring them back. It just sort of gives them even more of a three-dimensional existence.
And it's a nice little tidbit for the reader too.
Right, just a little Easter egg for the reader. Great. I love that stuff in other people's books. So.
While you were writing Monty in particular, was there anything that in the back of your head going, I need to put something in so readers don't think that the author is writing themselves as an author into the book?
He is very different from me, isn't he? Yeah. Mm-hmm. However, that basement flat that he lives in, I lived in that basement flat for a number of years. So there's that resemblance. I've changed the floor plan of it, but the basic layout of it is exactly as was.
His garden sounded lovely.
It was a really nice little sun trap, that garden. And me and my girlfriend who lived there we had a lovely little cat who used to enjoy being in that garden. It's always fun to reuse parts of your personal history. It makes things seem more real if you're writing from experience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful book and a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for reading, guys. I really appreciate it. And thank you for helping to get the message out there in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, we have so much fun with these books.
Oh, bless you.
but-
That's really great to know. It's great
Yeah.
to know there's somebody out there reading it. It's fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah, it's always nice when we have one of your books on the podcast schedule, because I know that I'm going to have a good time.
Oh, well, let's hope that we soon have 3 series spinning out there. Keep your fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yes. And speaking of all of your different projects, what do we have to look forward from you next?
Ooh, so as I say, I'm trying to get a play on in October, November. Probably the next thing to happen is this new series to go. Like, it's been sent out to various people. At some point, somebody's going to read it. It's summer holidays now, but somebody will read it. And I believe I believe it's got a strong appeal. And I think people will go for it. So that might be the next thing to happen. At some point, there'll be other books in both the Paperback Sleuth and the Vinyl Detective series. But this may happen before that, so keep your fingers crossed.
Is there anything you can tell us about it, or do you want to wait until it's...
Yes, it's a period piece. It's set in the 1930s. It's 2 characters, man and a woman. The great thing about it is, you know, Sarah, you're saying how you enjoyed the Paperback Sleuth because all these little details meant something to you, whereas the Vinyl Detective, it wasn't really your world. Well, both the Paperback Sleuth and the Vinyl Detective are specialized worlds, but this 3rd series, it's a straight up crime series. It doesn't have any specialized world that might alienate people. I mean, I could easily imagine people thinking, well, I don't want to read a book about vinyl, or I don't want to read a book about paperbacks, but this is straight up crime novel.
Well,
don't think it has any limitations. Like, so the others do have a sort of, I thought that they had built-in appeal, and they do, but that's also the flip side of that is sort of a built-in limitation. So I think the potential appeal of the new series is hopefully unlimited. Oh, and one more thing I should mention, since we last spoke, the Vinyl Detective is being translated into Spanish.
Congratulations.
And I've just heard it's also going to be translated into Russian.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it'll be English, German, Czech, Spanish, and Russian. So we're gradually expanding across the globe, guys.
That's awesome. And I
was really pleased.
I will say that yes, the Paperback Sleuth books have more that I understand about the world, but the thing about both this series and the Vinyl Detective series is that even if you don't know anything about vinyl, like I don't know anything about vinyl, or if you don't know anything about book collecting, you still make the stories and the characters and everything very accessible. So you don't have to know things about those worlds.
Thank you for saying that. I really do hope and believe that that's true. The problem is getting people through the front door, if you know what I mean, like getting them to read the books. And I think that they could be off-putting, the fact that there's vinyl and paperbacks. I don't think there's any problem once you get people reading, but there's a problem getting them to turn the first few pages. Whereas hopefully the new series, which is, as I say, straight up detective, police, crime, murder, mystery, may not be that difficulty there. So we'll see.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and a privilege.
Where can our listeners, we'll put the links in the description below. Let's see if I have memorized it. We've got Instagram.
Yep.
And Twitter/X, or whatever it's called now.
And Facebook, yeah.
And Facebook. And you have your Medway Pride radio show.
Yeah, which I think is more accessible through Reclaimed Radio, simply
Reclaimed
because
Radio.
functionality is better. Like if you want to listen to old episodes, if you go to Medway Pride, it's really difficult to find them, but on Reclaimed Radio, it's much easier. So yeah, and I was just recording some more shows today, so if people would have a listen, that'd be amazing.
Great. Did I cover everything? Did I remember it all?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else out there at the moment. There might be more websites to come. We will see.
All right.
Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much. As always, thank you for coming on to the podcast. It is such a delight to chat with you about your books.
I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to I hope to see you guys soon, because that would mean there's more books out there for us to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.